let me introduce you to Dave Spencer. He's already in the room with us. Hi, Dave. Thanks for being with us today.
Hello.
Hi, everyone, and hi, Dave. Welcome. So, as you can see, Dave is already in the room with us. I'll hand over in a second, but just let me tell you about how wonderful Dave is. He studied languages at Oxford University and is now based in Spain, where he teaches in a state school every day, which gives him that special real life hands-on experience that makes him such a great author for a lot of books, and especially one of the Macmillan most famous courses, which is Gateway. So if you're interested in learning more, do head to our website, macmillanenglish.com, and you can find the course that Dave has written. So if you're interested in his methodology, I'm sure that so many of you are here because you already know him, because he's really a star of the ELT world. And I'm so pleased to let you know that today he'll be talking to us about how to develop thinking skills in the classroom. He'll be giving us a lot of practical tips. So over to you, Dave, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Federica. Can everybody hear me? Can everybody just type in yes if you can hear and see me? Excellent. Thank you so much to all of you. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of people here. There are names, of course, that I recognize and know. There are friends out there. Hello to all of you. I've been in touch with some of you this morning. Dave's ESL Cafe is not mine, no. Okay, wonderful to see you all. Today we're talking about thinking. Okay, so I hope you have brought your thinking caps with you. Learning to think and thinking to learn. And we're really going to start at the start with a simple question, which is a difficult question. All the simple questions are also difficult questions. Why are thinking skills important for teens today? You might even want to type into the chat box any ideas you have about that while I give you some of my ideas. I'm sure you have some great ideas yourselves. Why are thinking skills so important for teens today? Well, I think they are important for everybody, right? Because generally in life, things don't always go according to plan. And we have the expression in English, to think on your feet. And I think thinking really is a life skill, isn't it? We can get knowledge at school, but if we learn how to think, we can solve the problems that life sometimes brings up. And as this illustration is showing, plan A often doesn't work, and so we have to try plan B. And in fact, unfortunately, plan B often doesn't work either. So we need to learn to think on our feet, and as a teenager, they also need to be able to adapt to the changes that happen, particularly in the 21st century. Somebody's mentioned, Ionela has mentioned being bombarded with information, and I agree. Another reason why thinking skills are so important today in 2021, I believe, is because of fake news. Sometimes just the quantity of news, and then also the amount of news which is not even true. And I think we talk about critical thinking because we need our students to be able to sort out what is fact, what is opinion, and maybe what is false information. And particularly because of the internet, I believe that this is more and more important for our students to learn. Now, we could talk about the next topic for a whole 60 minutes, but I'm just going to talk about this very briefly. I think we could simplify education and talk about two different styles of education. I've put this in inverted commas because we might not exactly agree, but I think there is a traditional way of looking at education in school. I say traditional, but maybe today many schools in many parts of the world, maybe in fact where I teach in Spain, they use a traditional method where the important thing for students is to memorize facts. Maybe it's to retain knowledge, so to memorize it all and keep it in your head. There is a way of looking at students that they are simply empty vessels, empty jars, a blank page. And the idea is that education fills them with information and knowledge. But we could say that then this could be surface level, superficial learning, where the students don't really, they learn, for example, dates in history. Maybe they learn the names of important people and places, but maybe they don't really understand sort of the deeper significance of these things. You can learn information about a novelist without reading his work, but I would call that superficial learning. On the other hand, I think there is a different view of education, which we could call progressive, where teachers question the students and students are also encouraged to question, to be inquisitive, to be curious. This is what we'll be talking about today. Also, we could talk about a type of education which is more hands-on, the students doing things, not simply remaining on the surface, but actually doing things with the information and knowledge that they are given. And in that case, I believe that the student is an active participant in the education process. So I would believe that a type of education where the students are encouraged to think and encouraged to question is probably what most of us would agree that we would like to achieve with our students. This is a lovely quotation, Sandra Parks, who writes about thinking skills. Teach children what to think and you limit them to your ideas. Teach children how to think and their ideas are limitless. That's quite a nice way of thinking about education, isn't it? And the importance of encouraging students to think. And that's what we're going to be looking at, of course, in this session, particularly in ELT. Hello, Isabel from Argentina. Good to see you here. Right, now, another reason that I think thinking skills are important is because thinking is becoming a part of evaluation and exams. Now, everybody, I think, probably has heard of PISA. Have you heard of the PISA tests? So the Program for International Student Assessment. They compare different countries around the world and they test maths, reading and science. But possibly what you didn't know is that this year, 2021, they were intending to introduce a new creative thinking test. That has been postponed to next year because of the pandemic. But it's interesting, isn't it? They are going to test maths, reading, science, which are essential, but they are also going to test creative thinking. Hello, Eduardo from PISA. You're from PISA, Italy, not PISA, maybe the Student Assessment Board. Or maybe you are, maybe you're from both. So creative thinking, it's important. Now, let's think about ELT for a second, and maybe somebody out there can help me because I know that there are people from Italy and maybe there are people from Switzerland. I got this exam on one of my trips and I always thought this was fascinating. This is an English exam. I think it's an English school leaving exam. And if you look at the titles of some of those essays, these are essays to write in English as a foreign language. Just look, for example, at number 3, hope. What meaning can hope have in our lives? Or number 5, beauty is being in harmony with what you are. What is meant by this statement? Do you agree? Now, I find this fascinating because this is an English exam, but in fact, to be able to do this essay well, you need good English, but I believe also you need good thinking skills, right? Because if you can't think of good ideas, then you're not going to pass this exam. If you think for a second about the Cambridge Advanced exam, yes, Edda, you've just exactly at the same time. The Advanced English exam is a great exam, but there are 2 elements, I think, to this exam. One is the English, and the other is the level of sophistication of thinking. And it seems to me, and this has influenced my writing in my new course, which you're going to see also now, it's influenced me because I think that we teach the English side, but we don't always teach the thinking side. We don't help them to think of good ideas. And I think that it's essential because in ELT exams, we need thinking skills, not just English language skills. This is the exam which I have been preparing my students for the last 17 years. Okay, this is the school leaving university entrance exam for the Madrid area of Spain. Now, if you look at number 5, it's the essay. It says, what should local authorities do to improve transport and mobility in large cities? And what happened to me is when I did this exam in class, my students, there was a rebellion because they told me, how do they know what local authorities should do to improve transport and mobility in large cities? In fact, most local authorities in big cities don't know what to do. And we are asking 16, 17, 18-year-olds to answer a question like this. We'll come back to that question afterwards, and I'll show you how we can help our students to answer it. But basically, they were arguing, saying that, okay, they have the English, but they don't have the ideas. In fact, don't worry, this is in Spanish, okay? But this is the evaluation criteria for marking essays in that exam. If you look at the top, it says contenido. Contenido means content, okay? So it's interesting that, in fact, half of the marks for this exam are for the content, not just for the English. And this is a translation of the criteria. It says the message, okay, so they get 0.5 out of 3. The message is clear, precise, and coherent with interesting ideas, okay? And the second one, it says the candidate can develop a personal point of view with original opinions, okay, which are adequately backed up. In other words, interesting ideas and original opinions are part also of the evaluation of this exam. Okay, now, yeah, actually, it is interesting. Somebody's just said that adults don't always have ideas either. And I will say that the thinking skills that I'm going to show you are perfect also for adults. What we're going to look at then is different ways of developing students' thinking skills. And we're going to begin with what I think is the teacher's most useful tool in the classroom. It's one word. Can you guess what the one word which I think is the best for getting students to think? Any idea? Would you just type in any Peter has got it immediately. Vildan. Yes, lots of you have got exactly the word that I wanted, okay? The word that I wanted is why. And we're going to start with thinking skills that are very easy, but that question, why, is so useful, isn't it? Now, I'm just going to give you some stupid, clear examples of how important why is. You're doing a grammar exercise where the students have 2 alternatives. I don't just want my students to tell me which is the correct alternative. I want them to tell me why, okay? Because the correct alternative is often 50-50. So show me that you understand. So why is it the present simple, not the present continuous? So when we're teaching grammar, the question why is a great question. We're doing reading comprehension, and my student says the answer to number 3 is true. Then the next question is why? Okay, so why do you think the answer is true? And then we need then the students to develop that and to be able to explain how did they find the answer? Where did they find the answer? We're talking about speaking exams, okay? What's your favorite school subject? Well, a student can obviously answer, they could say English, or they could say history, or they could say chemistry. But what we really want is why. So why is it your favorite school subject? And as Omar says, the students justify their choice. We want them to explain why. Let's imagine that we're teaching exam strategies. So when we do a reading test, usually it's a good idea to do the gist reading first. Why? Let's ask the question, why? Get them to explain why. If we're talking about spelling, okay, so when you write transmitted or transmitting, is it 1 T or is it 2 T's? Okay, 2. Why? Well, because it's one vowel, one consonant, the stress is on that syllable. Basically, it's going deeper all the time. So I'm beginning with something that I'm sure I know that we all do this all the time, but I'm just trying to emphasize the importance of getting students to think. And that question, why, is such a great question to ask. The student has to decide, is it stop talking or stop to talk? Okay, well, when it's stop talking, why do we use a gerund in this case? Okay, and getting the students to explain. And if they don't know the answer, that's also really important. That means that we need to explain this particular point to them. And finally, I mean, this is a question that actually I use a lot in the classroom. So at the end of an activity, just ask your students, so why did we do this? My students are not in a language school, we're in a school. And sometimes I think students do things just because they think they have to do them, but they forget why they're actually useful. And so just asking at the end of an activity, okay, why did we do that? Why did we do that exercise? Why did we do that song? Why did we do that game? Okay, so simply getting the students to think about why. And this is all, of course, encouraging thinking in a very simple way. Now, of course, the next thing that we can do, which I think is really useful, is to encourage students to use the why question. Now, I personally love it when my students ask a question, because it's showing that they are thinking about what I'm talking about. And just a little tip here is, instead of asking, has anybody got a question? I believe that often students, when you say, has anybody got a question? People are embarrassed. People don't know what to say. So instead of asking, has anybody got a question? At the end of your explanation, at the end of your talk, say to them, ask me a question. Okay, so you're really encouraging them to get involved and get into the topic. So students asking questions, obviously, if they are stupid questions, then you will not be very happy. But a good question is a brilliant thing, isn't it? A good question from a student proves that they are following. It proves that they are interested. Okay, now, in my opinion, you've seen that I'm a big fan of the question why, okay? And in my opinion, one why is never enough. So this is one of my favorite new activities, is called 5 Whys, or the why chain. And I discovered this from somebody mentioning the Sakichi Toyoda, who I believe is the creator of the Toyota car company. And I believe that he used this technique to get people thinking deeper. And I love this, because like all the routines that we look at today, they're all going to be pretty simple, I think, pretty concrete. By the way, if you have got questions, I'm looking at the chat box and I'm trying to concentrate on what I'm doing. If I'm not answering any of your questions now, please ask me at the end. You'll get a chance to ask me again, okay? The 5 Whys activity, I love this activity. We talked about that exam question for my students, okay? And they said that they couldn't answer it because they had no ideas. So I did this activity. The first question was, why is the traffic so bad in big cities? And they answered, for example, well, because there are so many people driving cars nowadays. Okay, now the next question was, so why are there so many people driving cars nowadays? Okay, and the answer could be, well, because public transport is not very good. So my next question is, okay, so why is public transport not very good? And then they might say, because it's slow, because it's unreliable, because it's not clean, because it's dangerous at the moment. So all of these questions, we keep on asking the question why. This is just such a simple activity, but you know how we tell our students they must justify their answers. This technique is just a great way to generate lots of answers, lots of arguments to support their answers. Yes, they get mad, Pedro. Yeah, they do get a little bit mad if you do it. If you do it for every single question, it could get a bit annoying. Okay, so don't do it every single day. Don't do a why chain. Okay, once a week is a nice idea. But it's just a simple idea. And you can use this with any topic. I've chosen this topic because this topic was a problem for my students. Any discussion where they can't think of ideas, do this why chain. Okay, so try that out. All of these activities I'd like you to try out in your classes. Right now, I love the question why, and I also have another question that I really like at the moment, and it's what makes you say that? What makes you say that? We talk about critical thinking a lot, okay? And the idea of critical thinking is that students justify their opinions. So I would say that critical thinking, a simple definition, maybe it's a limited definition, but a simple definition is encouraging students to think in a rational and open-minded way, being informed by evidence rather than feelings. Informed by evidence. So for example, this is an interesting question for students, okay? Should school start later for teenagers? Can you just say if yes or no? Do you think that school should start later, yes or no? Okay. I personally think no, but this is a really interesting text from my new book. And it's basically explaining in several countries, I don't know if you know, in several countries, Helena's just given the clue there, is that teenagers have different biorhythms. This is explained in the text, okay? Apparently, teenagers get tired later, which means that they wake up later too. And there is some sort of research which says that students get better results when they do exams later in the day, not early in the morning. Now, the students read this text, which has lots of arguments for and against, and then at the end, the critical thinkers question. If you look at the box number 5, in your opinion, should school start later to allow teenage students to sleep more? Then the question is, what makes you say that? And that's a powerful question. What are you basing your answer on? All of us, teenagers and adults, it's very easy to simply give an answer and say, well, they should get up later because they're tired. Okay, and then they stop. What we're encouraging them to do here is to use ideas from the text, other facts, other opinions, other experiences to justify their opinion, and then get them to share their ideas. But in other words, when we are talking about critical thinking, I think it's a great idea to use that question, okay? What makes you say that? What are you basing your opinion on? Not just like a personal opinion, but what are you basing it on? Okay, so that's another recommendation from me. Apart from the question, why? Let's use the question, what makes you say that? Somebody has just said that they begin class at 7:20, 7:10. I must admit, I don't think I can function at 7:10 in the morning. Right now, there is a problem with thinking about thinking, and that the problem is that sometimes it's very abstract. I showed this on the Gateway Facebook page recently. We get our students to answer the questions, and then we get them to explain how they got the answer. The answer here was green. Explain how you know that your answer is correct. My brain is always right. Okay, I think that's quite nice. Can you just add 17 and 25? What's the correct answer? Who's the fastest? 17 plus 25. It's not 32, it's 42. It's 42. Now, if I ask you, how did you get the correct answer? This is what this poor boy or this poor girl has written. I got the answer by talking in my brain, and I agreed of the answer that my brain got. Okay, I think that's a lovely way of talking about thinking. Okay, so that's quite funny. That's how the person knew. Okay, now, how many months are in a year? Is this number even or odd? 68, it's even. Then the answer was because I'm smart. Okay, so this is how the student got the correct answer. Right, so when we think about thinking, it can sometimes be confusing. I think when teachers think about thinking, we usually think about Bloom's taxonomy. I imagine that a lot of people have seen this. Have you seen this before? Yes, okay. So a lot of people have seen it. If you haven't seen it before, you might want to investigate this on Google. Just type in Bloom's taxonomy, Bloom's revised taxonomy. I'm not going to explain it in detail. Yeah, Patrick, I think I agree with you. I'm going to talk about that. If you look at this diagram, it's very interesting because I think it's interesting because it has lots of very useful verbs to talk about thinking. If you just look at analyze, okay, it says analyze, compare, contrast, classify, distinguish, select, categorize, differentiate, investigate. All of those are things that I think I do in my English language classes: deducing, investigating, concluding, contrasting, classifying. In other words, I think Bloom's taxonomy is really useful because it's giving us a way of looking at thinking in more detail. And I would recommend to look at this if you haven't seen this before. Now, I must admit, somebody said, I don't know if they said confusing, but I do actually find Bloom's taxonomy a little bit confusing with this idea of higher order and lower order. And I've always felt very ignorant because I never really got that idea. Higher order and lower order. For example, I mean, is understanding lower order? Is it easier? Is understanding easier than evaluating? I'm not actually sure that it is. Some people believe that understanding is actually at the top, you know, because if you can do the other things, then finally you can understand it. Okay. Now, I don't want to sort of criticize this too much, but in my head, I never quite understood. I mean, sometimes evaluating can be very easy, and sometimes analyzing can be very, very difficult. Okay. So in other words, I love the taxonomy because it gives me a way of thinking about thinking, but I find the higher order and lower order a bit confusing. And apparently I'm not the only person to think this. Now, today I want to talk quite a bit about what is known as the Harvard Graduate School of Education Project Zero. Now, I will give you some sources for this that you can investigate because it's really, really interesting, really useful for thinking about thinking and thinking about thinking in education. I like this quotation because it sums up how I think. Thinking doesn't happen in a lockstep sequential manner, systematically progressing from one level to the next. It is much messier, complex, dynamic, and interconnected than that. And that's how I think about thinking. Thinking is difficult to put in an order. I think it is messy. Thinking about thinking, it's messy, it's dynamic, and it's complex. Okay. And yes, somebody's mentioned thinking routines, and that's exactly what I'm going to talk about for this rest of this session. This book is an excellent book to read, Making Thinking Visible. Okay. And in this book, they talk about the thinking involved in understanding. And if you look at those 7 things, I'm not going to read them out, but if you look at those 7 things, those are things that I try and do in my classroom. Number 6, wondering and asking questions. I want my students to do that. Uncovering complexity, going below the surface of things. I also think that that's what I want to do in my classes. Number 2, reasoning with evidence. Well, that's what I explained in my critical thinkers question. In other words, these things that the Harvard Graduate Project Zero looks at are things that I want to achieve too. And they basically have this idea of making visible thinking and visible thinking routines. This is what I'm going to explain now. Yeah, Cecilia has got a connection there to Ron Richards. And you'll notice also I've got at the bottom there the website for the Harvard Project Zero. Really, really interesting to look at. And by the way, at any level, primary, secondary, and also adults, university and beyond. Now, how can we make thinking visible? Well, I'm going to show you a silly example. Would you like a silly example of making thinking visible? This boy has to calculate 4 dimes and 30 pennies. Which child has more? Amy has 30 pennies. Which child has more money? Bobby. How do you know? Show your thinking. Here is an example of visible thinking. Okay, I love that. I love that picture. It just shows the messy complexity of thinking in this poor boy's head. Okay, so there you go. There is somebody thinking and deciding that Bobby is the correct answer. I love that. Anyway, more seriously, okay, how can we make thinking visible? That's what we're going to look at now. One way that I'm sure we all do already, a simple activity that we all use, mind maps. So mind maps. Now, this is from, again, this is the new section in my new series. It's called Great Learners and Great Thinkers, this section. And you can look, actually, there's a great video in the book, and it's all about a school where they try eating insects for school lunch. Okay, and there's a text here which is all about wasting food. I mean, there's a statistic in the text that I think you can see. It says 1 of every 5 bags of food is thrown away. That's terrible, isn't it? In the UK, 1 of every 5 bags of food is wasted. That means wasting not just the food, but all of the resources that went into producing that food. Now, does anybody have any idea? Let's just brainstorm. Has anybody got an idea to stop wasting food? Can anybody sort of like just put in the chat box, how can we stop wasting so much food? Any ideas? Reuse it, give it away. Feed it to animals, not to be greedy, but buy less, right? Freeze it. Okay, great. What we're doing here is obviously brainstorming. We're generating lots of ideas. Now, of course, the next stage of brainstorming is usually sorting out ideas. Okay, this is the page. Somebody mentioned visuals. I mean, the visual impact of this page showing all of this waste. Okay, you can see on the right-hand side, we've got this great thinkers box. And what we've got is, how do you do a mind map? Well, you do it by doing the 4 things at the top. By the way, I mentioned before in Bloom's taxonomy, using these verbs, I think, is a great way of encouraging students to think, giving them clear instructions. Generate, sort, connect, and elaborate. Generate, that's what we've just done now, right? We've generated lots of ideas. The next thing to do is to sort those ideas into groups. And if you look at my mind map, we've got the central thing is stop wasting food. And then we've got all of these ideas coming out from that idea: buying, cooking, storing. And from each of those ideas, we're generating other ideas and connecting them. Lucy, this is from my new secondary course, which you will get to sample in the coming days. You'll be given some units from the book to look at. What we've done is generate the ideas, sort them, connect them, and then elaborate them. And one thing about mind maps is they look a bit messy. And in a way, what we're showing is the messiness of thinking, but we're doing it in a nice visual way, clear instructions, generating ideas, but sorting them into categories. So that's something that I'm sure that we already do in class. So we're already teaching thinking routines, even though maybe you didn't think you were. Mind maps are obviously a simple way of generating ideas. Wahiba, you will be able to buy the book very soon, I hope. And thank you. I'm glad that you like my jokes at the end. In fact, you'll see some new flipped classroom videos, which are even funnier soon. That's Natalia. Next idea, chalk talk. Okay, simple idea. Okay, simple idea. Number 1, ask your question and give some individual thinking time. So whatever your question is about, whether it's asking about food waste, asking about anything. Important here, it says give some individual thinking time. One of the things that we need to do is to give thinking time. Okay, we need to give thinking time. I think one of the problems in the classroom is we ask a question, and today I am very guilty of this, that I don't give you enough time to think. In your classroom, you need to go much slower than me today, and you need to give that time for students to think of an answer. Next, what you do is you get the students to write all of these ideas randomly onto a board, onto a large sheet of paper. Padlet, I know that lots of people nowadays with online teaching are using Padlet. That's perfect for this idea too, okay? Yes, exactly, Padlet. Anywhere that you can, a common space, okay? One space or several spaces where students are putting up their ideas, okay? They're sharing them. And of course, what you do next is you get people to sit down and to look and get them to read each other's ideas. And then, of course, you're going to begin a group discussion. Basically, what we're doing is we're sharing ideas. Again, I know that you do activities like this, I'm sure. I wanted to begin with activities that I think you're probably already using. It's a way of brainstorming together. It's a way of making thinking visible, because we can all see each other's ideas. We're sharing. And again, I think the great thing about thinking is it can be a collaborative activity, individual, but then also collaborative. So chalk talk, using Padlet, using whatever you want to use online or in the classroom, but getting students to compare these ideas. Yeah, actually, Patrick, I mean, that depends, because obviously if you're using Padlet, you can do that online. And actually, I'm still teaching face-to-face. So, you know, we do things. Students don't move around the classroom, but we can do things with paper, etc. Okay, yeah, I'm not going to have time to show that, unfortunately, but that was just an example of showing how we can put that into context. Now, the next section is thinking about how we can encourage students to show they've thought about what they've read, what they've seen, what they've heard. I've always had a feeling that with reading comprehension, we ask true-false questions, for example, or multiple choice, and students can answer those questions, but then they lose a global vision of the text. You know, they can get all of the true-false questions right, but then you ask them, what did you read? And they don't really have a global idea. They don't go deeper. So these activities are basically thinking skills, but also simple comprehension activities. This one is just a lovely alternative to any comprehension activity. You can do this with any text in any book, and I just personally think it's a lovely activity. I want you to imagine your students have just read their text, any level, and what you do at the end of the text is you ask your students to choose one sentence from the text that they think talks about a key concept, okay? One sentence, a key concept. Next, I get them to choose one phrase. So not a complete sentence, one phrase from the text that moved them, that interested them, or provoked them. Okay, so the first one is like the global view of the text. The next one is something that meant something to them, that was significant to them. Okay, just a simple phrase. And finally, they choose one word from the text that they think was central to the ideas in the text. Okay, so one sentence, again, you know, what I like about these thinking routines is that they're easy to remember and they're very concrete. And yes, as Nato has said, Nato from Georgia, I would imagine, it's engaging because you're getting the students to have a conceptual reaction to the text, but also a personal reaction to the text. And basically, I think with reading comprehension, we simply need to have variety. And this is an activity that I personally didn't know, but this is just perfect now for varying your reading comprehension. Easy to remember, right? Sentence, phrase, word. Marina has said there's no access to Gateway Online. Yes, there is, no, but maybe somebody can help out with answering that question from Macmillan. I'm not sure what the question meant. And obviously, they've done the sentence, they've done the phrase, they've done the word, and of course, they will also have different opinions. They will have different sentences, different words, okay? And in that case, they share their they share their ideas, and they discuss the themes that come out of the text. Okay, I hope that's clear. Sentence, phrase, word. Bettina, that is a brilliant idea too. Exactly. Yeah, this could be used at the end of the lesson to make them think about their lesson. That is a great idea. And remember, these thinking routines are very, very flexible. Yeah, so any way that you can think of using them in your classroom, definitely use them. Yeah. Another activity which we already do, and in the book like Gateway we do this, but remember this is just a great activity for any reading comprehension. At the end of the text, read the text, choose an appropriate title. Okay, and I'm sure that you already do that, but that's a great activity because it's getting the students to come to terms with the gist of a text and getting students to compare. Right now, another activity which I particularly like, which I didn't know before and which I've incorporated into my new course, it's called 3-2-1 Bridge. Now, the topic here is smartphones in school. Okay, and maybe you'd like to tell me if I talk about using smartphones in school. Can you write a word that makes you that topic makes you think of? How do you feel about using smartphones in school? Okay, we've got cheating, distraction, great, distraction, health, annoyed. Okay, that's great. So this is the first thing that I do then, okay? So we're going to read or watch a video about smartphones in school. Before we do that, then we ask okay? We ask the students to think of 3 words connected with that topic. Again, this could be any topic, okay? Any topic. Secondly, I get them to think of 2 questions you have about that topic. Maybe you don't have to write time to write questions in the chat box, but if you do, in the class, you would give them lots of time to do this. They've written 3 words that they think about using smartphones. They think of 2 questions, and then they think of 1 simile. Okay, this is a little bit more challenging, but getting students to think. A simile to describe using a smartphone at school. Okay, because using a smartphone at school is like, well, maybe using a smartphone at school is like using a pen because it's just a natural thing. Or you might have using a smartphone at school is like playing video games because you think it's not very useful. But basically, the students think of a simile. Right. Okay. Now, the next thing that I do is I get the students to share their ideas, as always. Okay, so we're getting lots of communication too. Okay, so we're getting lots of speaking practice, and that's important. Thinking is also helping speaking. Then what the students do is they read the text. Yeah, some lovely ideas here coming. I wish I could read all of your comments, by the way, but there are a lot of you and it's going quite quickly. But yeah, some great ideas. It's like walking on thin ice. That's nice. We've generated 3 words, 2 questions, 1 simile. And the next thing we do is we get the students to read the text. And after reading the text, then they decide if they want to change any of their words, if they want to change their simile, and does it answer their questions? So they thought of 2 different questions. Did the text or did the video answer their questions? If it didn't, of course, nowadays there are different places where they could find the answers, maybe from the teacher or maybe from the internet or maybe from their mobile phone. That could also do it. So in other words, yes, Wahiba, yes. So this is pre-reading, then they read, and then the question is, have they changed any of their ideas, of their opinions? That's why it's called 3-2-1 bridge, okay? The bridge is before reading, after reading, okay? That's the bridge. What they think before they read, what they think after they read. And I do believe also that with thinking skills, one of the important things about thinking is being flexible to change your opinion. And I think that in general, many of the problems in the world today is that I have my ideas and nobody can change my ideas. And maybe sometimes I wouldn't, I think it's good to encourage students to be able to change their opinions. Sarah's asked or made a good comment, and I would agree. Yeah, I mean, these ideas are, and in fact, in my new book, each of these will appear once, only once. And if you want to repeat them, of course, you can repeat them when you like. But yes, I wouldn't be doing this every day or every week, probably not even every month. But I think it's just nice. It also adds variety to the typical tasks that we already do. Somebody has said that it is wonderfully messy. Yes, Yonela, I think it is wonderfully messy, with some structure, though. Let's see the next slide, if it wants to appear. Right. The next thing that we want to do, well, maybe, Alisa, maybe I'm sort of also going to be thinking outside the box, because what we're going to do now is to encourage our students to dig deeper and to make personal connections, okay? Now, the topic of healthy eating for teenagers, okay? Hello, Irina, good morning. Thank you for your message this morning. Any advice to give teens to help them eat healthily? Has anybody got some nice ideas there? What would be good advice to give your students so that they eat more healthily? Any ideas? Slow food, start cooking themselves. That's a nice idea. No sugar. Start with a diet, maybe. Cook. Avoid fast food. Eat with them. That's a nice idea, yeah. Drink lots of water. Drink more water. Vary the kind of foods. Okay, right. Now, we've got this text, okay? We've got this topic. We brainstorm some ideas. And then we get the students to read some tips. Actually, you'll notice we're talking about social and emotional learning. One of the tips here in this text is be aware of emotional eating, which is something that we all need to be aware of, right? So we've got these tips. Now, the students read the text. And before we were looking at pre-reading, I want to look at coming out of a reading text. The students read a text like this, which does actually have an immediate connection with their daily lives, right? Because it is part of their lives, whether they're eating healthier or not so healthy. Now, this activity, if you look at the bottom left corner, this activity I'm going to show you now is called the 4 C's, okay? So it's a nice way of coming out of a reading text, coming out of a video, or coming out of a listening. The 4 C's, again, memorable title, okay? Connections, challenges, concepts, and changes. Number 1, make connections between what you learned in the text and your life or the life of people you know. Okay, so what's happening here is the students have read this text, but they're making a connection with their own lives. Again, I think this is important, that the texts that we're giving our students often do have some real connection with their everyday lives. Okay, there's another known as 4 C's. Maybe that's the 4 types of thinking as well, yeah? Number 2, think about ideas or opinions that you want to challenge or argue with. So maybe they've read the text, but they don't agree with something that appears in the text. That's okay, right? We talk about critical thinking. Critical thinking means challenging sometimes ideas that they receive. So we need to give them the freedom to challenge what they have read or what they've seen. The 3rd C is concepts. Which key concepts are important and useful to remember? Okay, so we're asking them, what are they taking away from the text? Which is something that often we don't do, right? We tell them to, we get them to understand the text, but we don't actually tell them, what are you going to take away? After reading this text, what are you going to take away from it? And finally, what changes you and others could make based on what you learned in the text? Okay, so the 4 C's, connections, things you'd like to challenge, key concepts, and changes that it might make to your life. Now, obviously, this depends on the text that you're doing. So not every text lends itself to this idea, but basically texts which are about, for example, typical teenagers, typical teenage situations, typical teenage life problems, life questions. This approach, I think, works really well because we're encouraging the students to, as I said before, extend their thinking, dig deeper, and make a personal connection with their lives. And as always, the last stage is sharing their ideas. Okay, again, wherever possible, I think the more students share their opinions and ideas, the better. Okay, I think I've got two more routines to give you before I finish. This one is a really nice one for thinking about challenges in life. And one challenge in life is situations where you have to make friends. Can anybody think of a situation where you are forced in life to make new friends? When does that happen? If you think of particularly of younger students, summer camp, work, moving abroad, changing to a new school, you're the new kid in town, university, exactly, okay? Now, what the students do is they think about these list of these situations and, you know, these situations recur throughout your life, don't they? And it can be emotionally difficult. This thinking technique is called compass points because we've got east, west, north, and south. And if you think for a second about starting, let's imagine that you're starting a new school, okay? If you're starting a new school, what could be exciting about being in that situation? Well, it could be exciting because you might make new friends, you might have new experiences, the school might be better than the old one, okay? So that's E for exciting. W is for worries, okay? So what worries have you got? So if you're starting life in a new school, it would be natural to be worried about, will you make friends? Will you be the only person who's new? Will you fail? Yes, Hanan. Your new teachers, so what are they like? Maybe you're losing old friends, okay? Now the N for north is N for need. What would you need to know that can help you to prepare? So we've thought about worries, we've thought about excitements, but we're also thinking about, okay, what do you need to know that could possibly help you? And the S, which is maybe the most important thing, are the steps that you can take to deal with the situation in a positive way. So basically, and I think I've used this particularly with the idea of starting a new school. Also, I think this is a great activity at the beginning of a new school year. Patrick, I like that one. Have I got news for you? Good television series too. Now, starting a new school year. Now, just think about that. Getting the students to discuss. Now, I think somebody's mentioned sort of like, well, you know, what if it is all negative? I mean, if students are worried, this is a great opportunity to deal with this worry. As I say, soon I'll be talking about social and emotional learning. But what we're doing is we're encouraging, first of all, people to talk about their excitements and their worries, but then also getting students to think about positive things that they can do to face it. And as we always say in English, a problem shared is a problem halved. Okay, remember, you're going to get a handout with all of these routines, so I hope you're going to try and use them all out when you get a chance. My last little section is talking about can we encourage students to think about different viewpoints? And I think this is really important. One of the things about thinking is seeing things from a different point of view. And I think this is my last thinking routine today, and it's sort of typical, I think, in that it's very simple, it's very basic, but in a way, I think it will be quite profound. Share, pause, think, discuss. In the Harvard book, they call it the Microlab Protocol, which I personally find confusing. So I call it share, pause, think, discuss. The important thing in this activity is pause. Okay. Number one, think individually about a question or topic, make notes. So this is for any topic that you want to discuss. If you want to discuss getting up late at school, if you want to talk about whatever, any of the topics that you want to discuss in class. Thinking time, something that I'm not giving you much of today, but thinking time. You're giving the students time to think and make notes. Next, get the students to form small groups, for example, 3 or 4. As I said, this could be a breakout room if you're teaching online, no problem. Breakout room with 4 people. In my class, I am teaching face-to-face or mask-to-mask, and we can get into groups of 4 without changing our seating. We simply turn position and look at one another. Number 3, the first student shares their thoughts for about 30 seconds or however long you want, okay? The others must listen in silence. Okay, now silence, isn't that like, that sounds easy, but often teenagers and often adults, we don't actually listen in silence. We all want to talk at the same time, okay? So the important thing here is listening in silence. Then everybody pauses for 20 to 30 seconds to think. So this activity is really based on the idea of, okay, give an opinion, listen to the opinion, and then think about it, okay? And then, of course, everybody else needs to take their turn. So everybody will share, then everybody will pause, and then everybody will think. And finally, when we've done that, we get to the moment of discussing. Okay, so in other words, there's been talking, there's been silence, and then there's been joining in. Actually, somebody's mentioned, Eva has mentioned awkward silence. And actually, I think that's a hot topic at the moment in online teaching, that sometimes we need those moments of silence, actually. And maybe even in my webinar, I should shut up from time to time. But yeah, sometimes a bit of silence is not a bad idea. Okay, it's a very simple activity. It's a very basic activity, and it's simply reminding us that to listen, you actually need to be not talking. And sometimes my problem with my teenage students is everybody is talking about the same, they're all talking at the same time. Okay, those were today's routines. Those are the routines that you're going to get on the handout, which you will receive soon. And one last routine, okay? And somebody mentioned at the end of a class, this is a great question to ask at the end of every lesson. Well, not every lesson, but from time to time, no? At the end of a webinar. I used to think, now I think. At the end of a topic, at the end of a text, you can ask them to think and has their opinion changed about anything? It could be a lesson on the future perfect. And I used to think the present perfect was difficult, and now I think it's easy, etc., etc. Okay, but simple way. I think it's always important to vary these things. So I said before, do it every day. I wouldn't do it every day. I would use different techniques, different times. Now, I'm coming to the end. I've got I think, therefore I am, and maybe we could change that into I think, therefore I am learning. And just to finish, I told you before that I'm a big fan of why. I've got the 4, maybe the stupidest questions for you today. I hope somebody can answer my questions. Can you please answer my questions? The first question is, why did the old man fall into a well? Basically, these are 4 very, very bad jokes. Okay, so I apologize now if you don't like my jokes, but does anybody know, why did the old man fall into a well? Well, the answer is because he couldn't see that well. He couldn't see that well. Okay, that was a bad one, okay? The next one is going to get a little bit better, I think, okay? You know, scuba divers, okay? Scuba divers, they always fall backwards out of the boat. Why do scuba divers fall backwards out of the boat? Does anybody know? Well, the reason is because if they fell forwards, they would never leave the boat. They would fall inside the boat, of course, right? Exactly. Somebody got it. Fabrice, you got it. Yes. Otherwise, they would fall into the boat. Okay. Question number 3, very important question. Okay. Why don't cannibals like eating clowns? Well, the answer is because they taste funny. They taste funny, okay? By the way, if there are any cannibals or clowns out there, please don't take offense. It's only a joke, okay? And number 4, my last why question and my last joke. Why do you never see elephants hiding in trees? Okay, I think you probably know this one. The answer is because they're very good at it. Yes, exactly. Anna got it right, because they hide very well. You can never see elephants hiding in trees because they're really, really good at it. Okay, I apologize for the bad jokes. Sorry. If you do want to stay in touch, and I know that there's going to be a couple of questions now, please do contact me. I'm going to try and answer questions now. I think there are a lot of questions, but if I don't answer them today, then please stay in touch at the Facebook Macmillan Gateway Facebook page, and I will be in touch. I always answer everything personally. I'm sure there are lots of questions, right, Federica? I've seen lots of, there are hundreds of people writing in the chat box, which I love. I just hope I can answer some of your questions. By the way, don't forget that in the next few days, you will also be seeing that new secondary course that I've been showing you bits of. You'll get a chance to look at that properly in more detail, okay, in the next few days. So I hope you enjoy that. I think Federica's having a bit of trouble coming back. I don't know if anybody's got if anybody wants to put in a little question there. To learn such bad jokes and to energize classes, well, maybe you should watch the bad jokes in my flipped classroom videos. They're pretty good. Okay. The elephant joke. Really, is that true that you didn't get the elephant joke? I mean, you can't see the elephants hiding because they're hiding very, very well. The new book is, yes, the new book that I'm talking about is the follow-up to Gateway 2nd edition. I can't tell you the name of the book, but I can tell you that it is a follow-up to Gateway 2nd edition. So if you like Gateway 2nd edition, I think you'll like the new book. I saw something about Spanish. The question, wait. Spanish, how does he get his students not to introduce? Right, okay, yes. So Natalia, that is a very good question. It's not just about thinking, right? It's about lessons in general. Right, I teach Spanish students, and yes, you know what, actually, Natalia, I have a webinar which is online on YouTube, and it's called To Speak or Not to Speak. And instead of answering the question in 2 seconds, you can have a look at that webinar, because in fact, it's a whole webinar dedicated to the question of how you can encourage students who often don't speak in English. How can you encourage them to speak in English? So can I ask you to have a look at that video, that webinar, if you can, because I think it'll answer your question in proper detail. Federica, you're here.
Hi, Dave. Sorry, it just took a second. Thank you for taking up the first question, and thanks for a magnificent session, really. You could see the love in the chat box, so thanks for that.
Thanks a lot.
We definitely have more questions if you have 5 minutes to answer.
Definitely.
So, thank you. Hazel was asking, does the thinking process to learn vocabulary vary according to English level?
Well, the thinking process, maybe not. No, I mean, I think the process and the approach to sort of getting students to help them to remember vocabulary will be similar. Maybe, of course, at lower levels, you're going to be doing more with visuals. And actually, you know, visual literacy is something that I think we're going to be talking about more and more in the future. But I think, yeah, I mean, I think the thinking procedure is pretty similar. And I think there's been a lot of work, of course, into memorization of vocabulary. And, you know, I think that approach, again, I'm just thinking that I have another webinar, which I think is on the Macmillan website, which is called Word Perfect. And I talk a lot about sort of, you know, how students remember vocabulary in the classroom. So again, it looks like I'm doing adverts for my webinars, but you'll get a proper long answer there.
They're a great resource. So yeah, do head out to the Macmillan website, guys, and check them out so that you can find other answers too. So there was quite the same question coming up quite a few times, and it was, when students don't want to engage and they just answer, I don't know, to all of your questions, all of your attempts at involving them, what do you do? How do you motivate them?
Yeah, well, I mean, I am still teaching in the, in school every day of the week, so I know what people are saying. Actually, in many of my webinars, I've started always showing a slide, which is, the expression in English, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And that I've always felt that's very much the case of teaching, is that we could have great ideas about life skills, about thinking skills, about anything. Speaking, we know it's useful for the students and we try it and it doesn't work. And there was a brilliant quotation from a man. He was the headmaster of Eton School, and he said, that is true that you can't make a horse drink, but if you never give it water, the horse will never drink. In other words, I do firmly believe that the job of a secondary school teacher is to keep on trying. And yeah, it's true. Students might say, oh, I have no opinion, I don't know. That may happen. But if we don't try, we will never get anywhere. So, my personal philosophy is that I try. And if it doesn't work, I also think sometimes we might think that, students are not going to respond. And then maybe out of 5 occasions, on 4 they don't, and then on the 5th they do, So I think we just have to keep on trying. I know exactly what the person means, what the teacher means, but I think we just have to keep on trying.
Thank you. There was another question coming from, so first of all, actually, there's Grace asking if you have a compilation of your jokes, because we love them. And I so got the one about the clown,
Yeah, the clown tasting funny. Yeah, no, I don't actually. And of course, those jokes are very, very old, I think.
Well, that's a great idea for a new course. That's all I'm saying.
They're
Um,
classic.
so Aisa was asking, as a teacher, should I plan for thinking in the classroom, or does it come spontaneously?
I think that this is, that's a good question. I think maybe it comes spontaneously, and so maybe it doesn't, in which case I think, in the last couple of years, that's why I've decided to incorporate some of these routines, because I think that way it's not hit and miss. We're actually really giving the students a structure to try to use these techniques. And as I said before, I mean, the example of writing an essay, some students immediately come up with ideas. So we don't need to teach them to think because they're already doing it. But I do think, that by having these routines, you're guaranteeing that everybody is going through the procedure. A bit like the mind map, generating ideas, brainstorming, brain showers, those things are always useful. So yeah, I mean, you could say that they might be using them, and some students will. And if you've got a class who are very high level of just general knowledge and general intelligence, maybe you don't need to do some of these routines, okay? But otherwise, I would say that it's a good idea to sort of encourage them and to give structure. They're all very easy structure to follow.
Thank you. Pedro was asking, should we manage the thinking process according to the learner's age?
Actually, interestingly, I don't teach primary, but I do know that these thinking routines, I think most of them have been used also in primary too. The results that we get will be different. The amount of language they come out will be different. But I think that a lot of these, even for example, sentence, phrase, word, choosing the most important sentence, the most important phrase, I mean, you can do, as soon as students can begin reading, they can probably start doing some of those activities. One thing that I think I saw, I can't remember if it was maybe a Medium or maybe a Cadman, was saying, would you do this in their own language, if necessary? And actually, that's a good point. I think I would. If the students have to write an essay and they haven't got any ideas and they don't feel like they can generate them in English, it would be better to generate them in their own language first and then help them to do it in English, than not. Yeah. So I think you can do them any age, most of them at any age, and also varying the language level a little bit. Yeah.
Thank you. So just for those of you asking for Dave's details, you can find them on the slides that we'll be sending to you at the end of the session. And Dave, I think we've got time for one more, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
So someone was asking in relation to the writing task that you mentioned, how to solve traffic problem. Would you consider it plagiarism if they didn't quote the text that they got their ideas from? And is it an issue if they actually get their ideas from a text rather than thinking?
Well, I'm not sure. Actually, that's an interesting question. If it came from somebody in Madrid, because actually, there's something about that task in the Madrid text where you're not meant to answer by taking all of the ideas from the text and certainly not using them. But I wouldn't say it's plagiarism. No, I mean, if you're going through. As I say, I'm conscious that somebody might be thinking about that particular exam, in which case it's a long conversation. But I'd say that basically, I mean, if you're using some of the ideas from the text and explaining them and developing them in your own words, then I think that's fine. Plagiarism obviously would be if you actually took the sentences from the text, and certainly in the Madrid exam that would be penalized. But actually, I suppose in any exam, if you've literally just copied sentences from the text, you're not showing that you can write English. So in other words, take the ideas from the text, develop the ideas from the text, but not copying from the text.
Thank you. That's a great answer. So thanks, Dave. It was a magnificent session, and we'll just let you go now.